something like that. And all of a sudden, a male jumps out of the back room and starts firing. All we see is muzzle flash. And right away, my partner gets hit. And I see my partner get hit, and he empties his gun at the guy going down. And I start firing, and he came running right into me. And the smoke is all around. And this, like I told you, it's a hallway. So bullets are ricocheting all around. The bullets are flying every which way. He fired 6 rounds. I fired 5 at the time. My partner fired 6 rounds. We got 17 bullets
flying around the hallway
and going around. So you can multiply that by 2 or 3, right? And the guy runs right into me, and I grab him with my left hand on his trap. And I actually was able to dig my hands in, hold his trap, and he still had the gun in his hand, but my gun was pressed against his chest. And I fired my last round. It was right into his chest and killed him right there, right against his heart.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Crime and Entertainment. It is my pleasure to introduce probably the most decorated officer I've ever had the pleasure of having on this channel. I mean, just to give you a few of his accolades here, I think he is the most recognized decorated officer in the NYPD. You have over 2,000 arrests. You've been in multiple firefights, I think around 15, could be more than that. And I think 4 justifiable shootings. You're an accomplished author with a book, Steet Warrior, that we'll talk about a little bit later on. You also have a TV series that I've had the pleasure of checking out a few episodes. It's on Amazon and a lot of other streaming sites. Street Justice, the Bronx. Please welcome to the show, Ralph Friedman. Ralph, how are you, my friend?
How you doing, Wade? Thank you for having me here.
Thank you. One question, one thing that stuck out at me, and I actually found out that you know this individual. When I heard Street Justice, I actually have a book by that name by an individual that I think you know. And his name is Chuck Zito.
Yes, I know Chuck very well.
Is that why you had to add the Bronx onto the end of the TV show? Did it have anything to do with legality reasons with that? Just out of curiosity.
You sort of, yeah, I think so. Okay. We did this quite a while back, and we didn't want to copy the same name. Right. And my show it's all about the Bronx. My career in the Bronx.
Okay. And I'll say this, that's how I kind of knew that I was really going to enjoy this episode, because you have guys from the other side of the law, like Chuck. I mean, anybody that knows Chuck's background, he was, a member of the Hells Angels before he kind of got out of that life and went more into Hollywood. And now he's, into all sorts of things, movies, TV shows. He's really doing a great job. I'm a big fan of his. But you also have law enforcement guys, such as like Joe Pistone, who played, Donnie Brasco. All of them say similar things about you. So that lets me know that no matter what walk of life they're from, you treat people fair. And that says a lot about you and your character, because my grandfather, who was also in law enforcement, was similar to you in those ways, because I would come up and guys would talk to me about him, and it would be guys that would be straight-laced family men. Your grandfather was a good man. Then it would be guys that I know were up to no good a lot of times, probably still up to no good. And they would say the same thing, man, your granddaddy was a good man. And so it doesn't matter like where you lie, what side of the fence you lay on. I think you treat people the same. Am I off on that, or do you think that's a good assessment?
I think it's a good assessment. I like to believe that I give respect and hope to get respect in return. Yeah. I know Chuck since the early 70s, and he's a good friend of mine. He's a respectful of law and order. I respect his side. And I'm good friends with Joe Pistone, Donnie Brasco. I've had dinner with him a couple of times. He's been over to my house and hung out for like 6 hours with a bunch of guys that we know. And you give respect, you get respect. It has to work both ways.
Yeah. And Chuck, I mean, done some great TV. I think I first seen him in Oz. And I mean, he's kind of he's been, Sons of Anarchy, a whole bunch of stuff. I think he's doing stuff with Gravesend now.
Yeah, he is. He's in the episode in season 2 of Gravesend. Yeah,
Okay.
Chuck's done a lot of things over the years.
Oh, yeah.
He started out as a stuntman, then got bit parts, and now he has his own movie actually, Honor Amongst Men.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, it's a bio on him.
No, it's a movie.
It's a movie. He just come out with a bio, I think, not too long ago.
He's the star. He wrote and directed it, and it's just about a biker gang, maybe 2 gangs having a war in a neighborhood where an older cop was involved. It was actually good. Chuck personally invited me to the premiere out in Long Island, New York, which I went. He also invited me when I first got hurt and got off the job. My career ended. I was in the hospital for a few months, and then I came out and I got invited to the Hell's Angels premiere movie, and my wife took me in a wheelchair there in Studio 54. But I knew quite a few. I knew quite a few of the Angels from hanging out in tattoo parlors.
Right. Studio 54, man, what a time that probably had to be back then. I always say if there was a time I wish I could have been alive in a place I could have seen in its prime and in its heyday, would have been Studio 54.
It was a very wild place. I worked there a little back in 77, and then I was told to get out of there because IAD was around and it was getting too hot. So I left, and then I retired in 84. I went back there like in 86 and worked a couple of years in Studio 54. But it wasn't the same in the 80s as it was in the 70s, but it was still very wild.
Yeah. I mean, just the story. I've seen some documentaries and I've read up on it. I mean, it was a wild place, man. What a time to be in that area.
It lives up to the hype.
Oh, I believe it. So let's get into a little bit of your story. We'll probably circle back around to Chuck and a little bit later, but let's get into your story, man, because you've got tales and stories for days that we can talk about. But I always, like to start from the beginning, especially when it's somebody's first time on the show. Tell us a little bit about, where you grew up, set the landscape, and then we'll get into kind of what got you into law enforcement.
Okay. I grew up in the Bronx. I was born, raised, schooled, had all my jobs, and played sports, everything in the Bronx. I was totally it was all Bronx, New York. I was a regular student, average student, I didn't study hard, but I never failed, and I was an average guy, and I played sports. I played I was on the junior high baseball team. And in high school, I played on the football team for a league. I was into sports,
right.
Not watching, but always playing.
Right. So pretty active.
And I didn't want to go to college. I got out of high school. My parents wanted me to go to college and stuff, and I didn't want to do that. I wanted to get out in the work field and earn my own living and stuff. And it was 1967. I graduated DeWitt Clinton, and my father got me a job moving furniture for a big company, Neptune Worldwide Movers, out of New Rochelle. And I was moving furniture back then. I was working out 2 hours a day, lifting furniture for 8 or 10 hours a day. So it all fit together. But and I was making a lot of money at the time. In 67, I was making $4.50 an hour when everybody else was making $1.15 or $1.25 an hour.
Yeah.
Right. And then one night I was out with a couple of friends of mine, and I said, "Oh, what are you doing tomorrow?" It was a Friday night. They said, "We're going to go take the police test," and I was like shocked. I said, "Police test?" Because I had no family, no friends, no involvement with the police, nothing like that. A couple of fights on the street. We never used weapons or anything like that. But I said, knock on my door. If I wake up, I'll go with you. So, because in those years was a walk-in test, and it was being given in my old high school, DeWitt Clinton. So they knocked on my door. I went and took the test. It was just never thought about it, anything. After I took the test, I started thinking it could be a career that would be a good career without college. And then I started thinking about it. And I did very well on the test, and I got called right away. I got called within a year later, but I was too young, so they hired me as a police trainee in January of '68.
Mhm.
And I did that exactly for 2 years until I turned 21. And then they put me right in the academy, which was 4 months. And then I hit the streets. And I got assigned right away to the 41st precinct, which is known as Fort Apache. And it was the most violent precinct in the city and probably in the country at the time.
Wow.
I grew up in the Bronx, and this was in the Bronx where I got assigned, and it was like another country. I grew up, all Italian, Jewish, and Irish, and then now I put on the other side of the Bronx, just a couple of miles away in my own borough, and then I came across, the violent crime and the criminals, and blacks and Hispanics that I never dealt with, and there was a complete disregard for human life, and drugs were everywhere. The only drugs I saw actually was heroin until the city introduced methadone, which was liquid heroin anyway. But
Mhm.
that's what we dealt with, and the violence was incredible. It was like I couldn't believe it was where I grew up, even though it was the other side of the Bronx.
Now, what year is this when you hit the streets in that area you're talking? What year is this?
That was April of 1970.
April of 1970.
Yeah, I
What
left the
is
police academy and went right there.
okay? And this actually can even go back to when you grew up, but like, was there a heavy organized crime element in the area of the Bronx where you grew up?
There, yeah, there was always organized crime, but it was very under the table. Let's say, it wasn't out in the open. Uh, there was always organized crime because there was, people wanted different vices
Right.
and things like that, and everything else that they're involved in. But it was very under the table.
Okay.
Not like in the '80s and '90s or 2000 where it really
A little
made
bit more in your
headlines every
face.
day.
Yeah.
Let's say like they wanted to keep it under the table. John Gotti brought it to the forefront.
Right.
He was
Everybody else kind of before him was
well,
kind
they
of
wanted to be quiet. They
yeah.
didn't want you to know who's running the place.
Yeah,
They
your
played
Carlo
low key.
Gambinos and guys
Yeah,
like that, they wanted to make the money and stay in the shadows and preferably
exactly.
not to be seen.
John Gotti wanted to be a movie star, so he
Right.
was out in the forefront with the $2,000 suits back then. Wanted to be on the front page, and he was very smart the way he handled the press too. He was he
Oh,
was a showman. He was a
he
showman.
used the press to
Yeah.
sway. He was like what I tell people, you know, The Sopranos is regarded as one of the best TV shows, of all time. I would tend to agree with that. And people fell in love with the main character, Tony Soprano, who, by all accounts, is not a good person. Like he cheats on his
Right.
wife, he kills people, he beats people up. He's not a good guy, but everybody loved him. He was like the anti-hero. And that's very much what John Gotti was. He used the press to sway this, oh, I'm shooting fireworks and I'm a good guy, and he used it. And you're absolutely right. You hit the nail on the head. He was
Well,
able to use the press when most people wanted to avoid it. I think I'm sure he enjoyed being in the headlines, but he was able to use it as a positive.
I agree with you on most of it, but one thing I'll disagree with you. I don't think the Soprano, James Gandolfini, was like what made the show such a hit was that they showed the other side of him, the
Yeah.
family life. They showed his weaknesses, his
Mhm.
sicknesses, and stuff. Where John Gotti, he only showed strength at all
Right.
times, no matter what. I mean, if everything was crumbling behind him, he's still standing up. You know what I mean? On The Sopranos, they showed Tony Soprano. They showed his weaknesses
Yeah.
and his family life and the problems he had with other mobsters and even his own mobsters. How he had to keep them in line.
Mhm.
I think The Sopranos was the best TV show of all time of mobsters, and I was lucky enough to get involved with the movie, the
Oh,
prequel,
many saints, really?
The Many Saints of Newark. I was the technical advisor for 5 scenes.
Wow. Did you get to work with David?
No, well, he was the main David Chase.
Yeah.
I didn't meet him. No, I
Okay.
met Tony Sirico and I met Ray Liotta.
Okay.
I worked
Wow.
with them.
And
And
sadly,
Tony
both of those
Sirico,
gentlemen are no longer with us, sadly. That's
yeah, they
unfortunate.
both died pretty close after the thing was filming.
Mhm.
And Tony Sirico didn't even make it into the movie. I don't know why, but his scenes
Yeah.
got cut. But I set up one scene with Ray Liotta, and I also taught the black guy that was the star.
Right.
I taught him how to shoot a guy where he comes out and shoots a guy, one of the wise guys, in a car. I set up that whole scene and taught him how to do it. I tell you a funny story about the movie.
Yeah.
It was filmed in Newark, right? And it was
Mhm.
filmed after my show. And my show takes place in the Bronx, but we used Newark as for filming because I was embarrassed. I couldn't even find a burnt out area in the Bronx that looked like the 70s. They did so much rebuilding, right? So uh, one of the things I had to do was teach 48 actors how to carry themselves and look like police officers getting ready for a riot. So first they had me teaching them how to use nightsticks and stuff, right? And I taught them. I didn't know there were so many ways you can misuse it, but they were, a little like spastic for a while, right? So I get them all in line and stuff, and now they tell them they're going to get suited up. So they all put on uniforms, and we use the front of it like a school, but they made it look like a precinct. So I line up all the cops, shoulder to shoulder, head between each one, and I got them holding their nightsticks in a serious manner, like they're ready to use them. Then they came out with two big bags full of the guns to give them, right? And they're all like hard rubber 38 service revolvers, and they give out all the guns. Now I got everyone standing there, and they say, and I'm facing the 48 guys because I'm lining them up, making sure everybody's right. And then they call for the director calls for all the extras to come out. So they bring out 250 black people, men, women, children, teenagers, boys, girls, old people, young people. Everybody comes out, 250 of them. And a lot of them are sporting signs. Fuck the police, fuck brutality. So one of the guys with the sign comes up behind me, right? And he says, "Are you Detective Friedman?" I go, "Yeah." He says, "Oh, I played a uniform officer in your series." I said, "Now you're doing this. You're holding fuck the police there." He goes, "Hey, I'm just an actor. I do what they tell me. I get paid." I said, "I know. I'm only kidding you." But that was a pretty funny story.
Yeah. That's interesting, man. And I was so excited for that prequel because Sopranos, man, was my thing. I didn't catch that when it started to air. I caught on, I think, around the third season. And when it come on, I caught an episode and I was just like, this looks pretty good. So I stopped
Yeah,
for the
it was
third
great.
season, went back, rewatched it, got caught up. And then from that point on, man, every Sunday it was like, you had church and then Sopranos on Sunday. That's what it was in the house. And I've been fortunate enough to actually interview a lot of the guys from that program. I had Dan Grimaldi on, who played Patsy. I had Robert Fernaro, who played Eugene. I had Frank Santarelli, who played Georgie the bartender, who got brutalized for 2 or 3 seasons. John Fiore, who played Gigi. A number of people, and it's really been a treat to be able to do that because that's such an iconic show. And I always make this statement: it was shot so well, the writing was so perfect that outside of the technology, like big computers, flip phones, outside of that, you could play that show today and it would still be great. The technology
Absolutely.
is the only thing that dates that show.
I watched that whole series, me and my wife, like 3 times.
Oh yeah, yeah. I still
The whole entire thing.
It's almost like sometimes I'll put it on now and like I laugh because there's a lot of comedy in there that I don't think you get originally. You have to really rewatch it, and you get a lot of comedy, especially from Sirico. He was hilarious.
Yeah, he was hilarious. And James Gandolfini was very funny too.
Yeah.
He had a lot of good lines. He carried it well. He was very well liked. I knew some people that knew him. I never had the honor or pleasure to meet him, but people that met him talk about him very highly. Very generous. He took care of the cast.
Yeah.
Took people under their wing. He gave gifts out all the time. Very good guy. Very sad to hear when he died.
Yeah. And Sirico, had that wasn't too far off of his real life past.
Yep. He did some time. He did time.
Done some time and was kind of, connected in some ways.
Not sure if he was acting at all, right?
Yeah, that's what I heard an interview recently with Robert Eiler, who played AJ. And he was talking about people from the cast, and he said, you hear people say all the time, I wish I could have met James Gandolfini. And he's like, yeah, that would have been great. He was a great guy, much different than his character. And he said, some people say, I wish I could have met Tony Sirico. And he's like, you did. That was who he was. There was no acting. That was exactly how he was off camera. There was no deviation. That wasn't a character. That was just him on screen. You met him.
I met him, all the times that I was technically advising. I ran into him. I got some pictures with him and stuff. Real nice guy, but you could see there was an underlying toughness there.
Oh yeah,
Definitely tell that.
So you hit the beat, you get out there, you kind of getting into the mix of things. How long were you on the street before you started rising up? Because you went to anti-crime first. The steps, and you correct me if I'm wrong, is on the street, anti-crime, and then detective. How long before you kind of bumped up from when you first hit the streets?
Well, when you first get out there, it's not like today where there's training offices and field, train. You're on your own.
Yeah.
You go out there, they tell you check the map. They give you a post, tell you to check the map, and then it takes you almost a whole day to find where you're supposed to be. And you're walking through the streets, and all you got is your gun, shield, and your guts. And you do foot posts in the beginning, and you also get assigned. They pick you up to sit in the hospitals with psychos or sit in homes with DOAs. That's the radio car will get the call. They find out there's a body or a psycho, and then they pick up a rookie to do that. Then that's how you get, meanwhile you make a few arrests, you give out some summonses. And I made a few arrests, and I got myself into anti-crime. And it took me about 15, 16 months to get there. And once I got there, it was funny because I really saw these anti-crime cops working, and I wanted to emulate them. I always wanted to be. I saw that. I said, man, I want to be like that one day. And the ironic thing is, when I got in there, I started to work with a few of these guys, but I was already making a lot of arrests, and that's why I got into anti-crime so fast. And anti-crime units are really all go-getters.
Mm-hmm.
Like the uniforms are basically there to deter crime.
Right.
Detectives, 90% of the time, investigate the crime after the fact.
Mm-hmm.
And anti-crime, we're supposed to be there during the arrest, during the crime, and place them under arrest, which also helps for conviction rates because we're part of the testimony. We're part of the court proceedings, and we can testify, and we become expert testimony, where civilians get scared, nervous, don't show up, or don't testify correctly, leave out points that are important. So it brings up our conviction rates, but it also helps put away bad guys for a longer time.
Right. Yeah, it's a little different when you, as being in law enforcement, when you can get up there on the stand and be an eyewitness to what's going on, as opposed to, like you said, them, interviewing somebody off the street that doesn't really have the knowledge. A paid lawyer, I tell everybody, a paid lawyer is worth every penny if you find yourself in a situation where you need it, because that's what they're trained to do, is just tear them apart, tear down their credibility. And a lot of times they're successful in that.
Oh, absolutely. But there's cops that don't testify all the time. I'm talking about the heavy hitters.
Yeah.
The cops that are making arrests all the time. I basically made arrests every day I worked, either me or my partner or both of us. So when you're going to court a lot and dealing with the district attorneys and the paperwork and the knowledge of the law, and you're doing it all the time, it's a second nature. Because there's cops that don't make that kind of arrest. They might make 2 or 3 arrests a year. And, when they get up there, if the case isn't pleaded out or something, and they got to testify 6, 8 months later, I'm sure they're nervous too,
Yeah. What makes Ralph Friedman so different than any other cop? How are you able to make arrests every day and other people weren't? Why is that, you think?
Well, there are guys that do that every day. There's guys that go out in anti-crime, but I always wanted to go hunting, looking for trouble. Mm-hmm. And I always found it, and I didn't mind if I worked 12 hours a day or 7 days a week or holidays. I didn't go to weddings and bar mitzvahs and christenings and synagogues and churches. Work was number one with me, and I would take any arrest at any time, and I was out looking for it. And then you develop an eye, a sixth sense. Right. You notice guys that are walking around with guns. Guys that are dealing drugs and certain moves they make. I mean, if you're doing it all the time, you're part of this scenario where other cops may not pick it up. They may not be looking for it. They may not be interested in it. They do need cops to answer the radio and go to other emergencies and stuff like that. I wasn't one of them, just like they weren't one of me. But I worked with great cops. I broke in a precinct that was a really heavy precinct. I mean, to give you an example, when I finally got to a radio car in that first 16 months, and got up being on the street, on a Friday or Saturday night, you would get that radio car with the light and siren on, and you would be backed up 30 jobs for the whole night, and you're still going light and siren for 8 hours. There's no break. You go, and then they're heavy jobs. People getting beat up, robberies, burglaries, stores getting broken into, shootings, stabbings, assaults. You're just going. I mean, the time goes by like in a flash of a second. There's no. It's not like some precincts. You see the guys sitting on the corner having pizza or coffee, rapping to the girls and stuff. I mean, you work in certain areas, you're busy every minute. And it was a violent area. So you had to be on point. I mean, I took my job very seriously. I go to work well fed, I go to well rested and worked out. So I came with a pump. I was ready for action. It was like a combat unit.
Yeah. And it sounds like, I mean, well, I think when you immerse yourself into it as deep as it sounds like you're saying that you were, I can see where, it would come that easy because like you said, I think in any profession, when you get to the point to where you can communicate with your eyes and you can understand things with your eyes as well as your mind, it makes things so much easier. And if you spot you can not even be listening to somebody's conversation, but with your eyes spot the interaction between the two, that lets you know that something fishy's probably going down. So that's going to give you that leg up over someone else. So I can definitely see how that was.
And not only that, in respect to that, what you said, your eyes, ears, and you know the movement, the same with your partner. I've always worked with incredible partners. I worked with a guy, Lester Rudnick, who was my police partner for quite a few years. And I mean, me and him didn't have to say anything. Mm-hmm. We knew he saw what I saw what he saw, and we reacted. We didn't even have to talk. And then I had the same relationship with a couple of detectives that I worked with, most notably Timmy Kennedy. And we didn't have to talk. We knew we were looking for the same thing. He saw what I saw what he saw. And we took appropriate actions. Never had to worry about my back or anything else when I worked with guys like Les Rudnick and Tim Kennedy.
Mm-hmm. Which one was the guy that was the former basketball coach you worked with?
Oh, I didn't work with him. That was Bob Stockman. He's a good friend of mine who I met years later. But ironically, we met through some mutual friends, and we're good friends. But he started his career because he read an article about me, and he wanted to get into law enforcement. An article that came out back in something like, it was written in 76, but came out in 1978. And he went into corrections, and he went into ICE, and all that stuff. He did a lot of drug arrests and money laundering stuff.
Okay. Well, when you're in the anti-crime, what are you mostly, taking off the street? Is it drug dealers? Is it guns, robberies?
Well, basically what they wanted us to do was robberies, purse snatches, and guns.
Right.
You weren't supposed to respond to radio calls. You're supposed to do it all on your own initiative. Mm-hmm. So, and what we did, besides patrolling and looking for suspicious characters, we also we blended into the neighborhood. Sometimes we put on hard hats and stand with a shovel at a construction site, drove a milk truck, drove a yellow cab, laid on the street as a bum, just to blend in, going to stores as a shopper or be looking in the window. It was really blending into the neighborhood where you don't stand out, where they don't say, oh, that's the regular unmarked car. A lot of times we had our unmarked cars that we used, but we also took a lot of cars out of the Whitestone Pound and used them. And there was no way, because sometimes a little kid could see the regular used unmarked cars that are assigned to the precinct. So a lot of times we took cars out of the pound and there was no clue what, there was police in them. Yeah. Or if you had a yellow cab.
What, in this time period here, what was one of the first real serious either cases or situations where, you had to use your weapon? What was kind of the first thing that really kind of got the adrenaline flowing here?
Well, this is funny. The first thing was I was off duty in my bedroom, and I was working out, listening to music, and a girl I was dating at the time calls me up and says she was about 2 miles away, and she's saying she's in the store shopping with her mother, and there's two guys pushing her mother around and her. And they called me on a hard line. We didn't have cell phones back then. Right. This was my first shooting. So I didn't call 911 or anything. I jumped in my car. I race over there. And as I pull up, there's a big crowd, and there's a truck pulling away, a box truck. And the mother's crying, and the crowd's all saying these guys pushed the mother to the ground and punched the girl. And they're all saying they went that way. So I was right behind them. I followed them. And they went up Jerome Avenue, made a turn. This is in the Bronx also, onto Gun Hill Road, which would put them right out of sight of Montefiore Hospital, which was a big, well-known hospital still today. So I pull them over, and I get out of my car, and I identify myself as a police officer with my shield out. And these two guys get out of the truck, winds up, and we find out later they're two brothers. And they come out with tire irons. So I draw my weapon, and we're in the street. We're in the street where I pulled them over. And they start swinging the tire irons at me. And I didn't ever fired my gun at a person yet or anything in the street, other than a warning shots, but never at a person. So I'm backing up, and they're still swinging. And we go between double parked cars, then the cars parked illegally, and then onto the sidewalk. And these guys are still swinging. And I'm still not shooting, right? I'm like an idiot, I guess, right? So all of a sudden, the guy comes up and really close to me and swings right at my head where I could block it with my hand. And I put my hand up with my fist with my gun in it, and he slams my hand really hard with the tire iron. And I didn't know it that second, but he broke my hand. But I didn't let go of the gun, right? So I push him back, knowing in my mind, I already know the other guy's going to run up behind me.
Yeah.
Which he did. And I turn around, and he's just ready to hit me. And what happened when I turned around, my gun got stuck into something. I didn't know what it was. I knew it had to be him, right? So because he's right behind me. So I fire, and I put 4 holes in him with one bullet. The bullet goes in his neck, comes out his neck, goes in his shoulder, out his shoulder. He goes down. Now I know the other guy's going to hit me again from behind. So I turn around. Now the guy hit me over the head, and I couldn't even see. That's why when I turned around, I didn't see him. I just had blood filled in my eyes, right? So then I turn around, and the other guy, the pipe is just coming down and hit me in the head again, and a cop's hand grabs it. Because the girl called the cops respond, and they described me and the incident. They see it on the street, and the cops saved me from getting hit again in the head, which would have crashed my head in because I had a fractured skull already. So we all wound up in the hospital, right outside the hospital. We went right in that hospital. The guy I shot, he was okay. He lived. He was in the hospital, and he got surgery. The other guy got beat up a little bad, and I had a fractured skull and a broken hand. I left in a turban and an arm cast.
Jeez.
And then from that moment on, I learned, don't give him that much rope. It almost cost me my life, Then I decided that, you get your chance to drop the weapon, but if you keep coming, you're getting shot before you get that close.
There was a story that I heard, I forgot the podcast, because you talked about a girl you were dating at the time. You were actually kind of, I don't want to say fooled, but you were kind of being set up by a girl to possibly be murdered at one point in time, correct?
I think my wife now wants to murder me. No.
Well, I mean, I think mine does too, but
but this girl took it to another level. I was dating this girl. I met her on the street, real hot Spanish girl. And we went out a couple of times. And then it got to the point where I was going to go up to her house and have sex, right? And in those days, there were no cell phones. This is all going back. We didn't have radios, cell phones, beepers, nothing. It was hardline, So we made up a date that I'm going to go over to her house next night, and wound up, I made an arrest. Like I said, I always take collars, even though I shouldn't have, because that was going to be strange, and strange is always good, But so anyway, I get this collar. I call her from the precinct. I tell her I can't make it. I got all this paperwork. I'm going to be tied up all night. And she's calling me back at the precinct and saying, oh, you got to come over. You got to come over. I was counting on this. And all this. Anyway, I never made it because I had the collar and the paperwork tied me up through the whole night, vouchering stuff and everything. So The next day, we say, okay, I'll come to your house in the next day or two, you know, and make it up to you. And with me and my partner out on patrol, we get what's called a 10-2 forthwith. Now, 10-2 means report to the house. Forthwith means right away.
Mhm.
You know, some kind of, they want me right away, you know. So we go in and we head towards the boss's office, and we see two suits there. And right away we figure it's internal affairs, you know, what we do now, you know, what allegations made now. And the boss comes out and tells my partner, you go back out. And he wants me in the office alone. So I go in there and they introduce themselves. One's a detective, one's a lieutenant, and they're from the intelligence division, which now I'm saying intelligence division. You know, what would they want with me? You know, I have enough intelligence. So, so they said, I thought I was smart enough, you know. So they said, you had a date with a girl named Lucy last night? Now my head's spinning. How would they know that? You know, how would anyone know that? You know, except maybe my partner, right?
Yeah.
So I said, yeah. They said, you were supposed to go up to a house? I said, yeah, my head's spinning. I can't believe someone knows it. So they say, well, we have an informer, and this girl had 2 or 3 guys in the closet in the bedroom that were waiting for you to get in there and get undressed, and they were going to shoot you, kill you. And my head is absolutely spinning. I said, what the fuck are you talking about? And they said, well, you killed her brothers 8 months ago. And that's why she was setting me up. I had no clue. You
Wow.
know,
When
I was
y'all
in
met,
a shootout 8 months prior where I shot 2 guys, killing one of them, and one of them was her brother. Now, the reason she didn't get arrested is, you know, CIs are rated by how much good information they give you. If you
right,
got a CI that gives you 10 pieces of information and 8, 9, or 10 of them are good, that's a good CI.
right.
If the guy gives you 10 pieces of information, 3 are good, you know, that's so. Now, this guy, he was a 10. They said every time he gave information, always panned down, 100% of the time. But now you got no recording. There was no recording of, you know, the girl setting this up or anything with the executioners. And all you got is he said, she said. It would go
Yeah.
nowhere. There's no evidence.
Nothing was
It was
actually
not
done. Yeah.
right. It was not prosecutable. And if they tried to do it, they would burn a good CI. He would get exposed, his identity, whole thing.
Yeah.
He wouldn't give information. So it was just told, stay away from her. And, you know, obviously I did. She called the precinct quite a few times. I just never returned the call. And then it died out, you know, but that was a close call by the stroke of.
I think if your love for police work hadn't been so strong, I think the average man would have probably foregone the arrest and went and made
Yeah,
that visit.
exactly. You know,
When you guys first met, just out of curiosity, did she approach you?
well, she was really hot. You know, like she
Yeah.
made her presence known.
Yeah,
Where
she
I
put
would
herself
want,
in front of you.
right, where I would want to approach her. You know, you see something like this in front of you, you want to talk to her. You know,
And I'm assuming by brother, did she not give you a correct name, or you just didn't make a
no,
correlation to the last name
it was a
match?
stepbrother,
Oh,
and
okay.
she give me you know, they give you fake names. You know, that's I don't date a girl and say, let me see your ID. You know,
I don't know of very many scenarios where a man can say he gave up on going to meet a woman for sex and it saved his life. That's
yeah,
that's
right.
that's got to be one
That's what
for the
makes it an
record.
interesting story. You know.
What's some more good anti-crime stories, man, before we move over to the detective side? What's some other good ones?
I gotta tell you, when I was out in a yellow cab, right? I'm driving. My partner's in the back seat, right? My partner was Bobby DeMattis. May you rest in peace. He passed already last year. So we were out driving around, right? And we see these crowd of kids, and they're approaching people for money. You know, it's sort of like a little gang, right? So we know sooner or later, so we thought, but we thought they were going to eventually rob somebody, you know, either intimidation robbery or just, you know, pull out a knife or a gun or something. We figure they're gonna rob. So we're following them, and we get to the corner of Fox and Prospect Avenue, which is a pretty bad neighborhood, and it's a borderline to the next precinct, the 4-0.
Right.
And we got them under surveillance, and we're like across the street, but it was a 4-lane road, 2 lanes each way, so it was a lot of distance. But I positioned the cab where I could see it. So we see them go over to this guy, an older guy, somebody. These kids were like anywhere from 14 to say 18. And the guy they approached was like in his mid 30s. And the next thing we know, right in front of us, he pulls out a gun and shoots one of the kids right in the chest. So the people we thought were going to be the perpetrators turned out to be the victims. So my partner was in the back seat and he had a radio. And right away he called for 1013, which means cop needs assistance. And he calls for an ambulance because we see the kid get shot right in the chest. And I pull the cab right up to the scene. And the kids all dispersed with the kid laying on the floor who's shot in the chest. And the guy runs straight up Fox Street. So I run right behind him. And my partner runs across the street to run parallel to him. So we like triangular get him in this zone. So my partner is directly across the street from him. But there's parked cars on both sides of the street. And I'm running behind him. And the guy's turning around shooting at me. And I'm shooting at him. We're having a running gun battle up Fox Street. And my partner can't get a shot off yet, right? Because the cars are in his line of fire. So the guy runs out of bullets, right? And he stops at a car and he starts to reload, right? And now my partner takes up a position right across from him. And I stop and I hide behind like what they call a stoop, like a few steps coming out of a building. And if you go down, it's like a basement apartment.
Right.
So I'm down there and I got this staircase hiding my body and most of my head. You can only see from my eyes up. And I ran out of bullets also. So I took out a second gun. I always carried 238s, had one on my waist and one on my ankle. So I pull out the second gun and I put it on the stoop and I'm actually lining up my shots. Now it's not fast. It's sort of like slow motion a little. Mm-hmm. And he's reloading and he starts firing. This guy was drunk and high on drugs, but he had the mindset to still fire one round at me and one round at my partner, keeping him pinned behind the car. But my partner can't see him really at all because he's only popping up to put a shot towards him between the cars. Me, I see his whole body. He can only see from the top bridge of my nose up. And I'm lining up my shots and nothing's happening. I fire 5 rounds now. I have 6 rounds. So I got 1 left. I see my partner. He pops up the guy and my partner fires 1 round and catches him right in the shoulder. He grabs his shoulder and falls down. I run up to the guy and the guy, he's laying there, but he lifts his arm to point the gun at me again. I'm standing right over the guy. He still went for it. So I put one right between his eyes, right there, right in his head, and he's dead. The wind up, after the body went to the morgue, the guy had 8 rounds in him. I was hitting him all the time, but for some reason, and they were all like centimeter shots, not in the chest, more like the solar plexus and the stomach.
Yeah.
And the guy didn't go down. He was so high.
A painful place to get shot at for sure. In fact,
but he didn't even flinch. Like I thought I was missing. And I'm saying, how could I miss? I'm lining up my shots and I got support, But, he went for the gun at the end and that was it. So
was that your first shooting?
No, that wasn't. That was, I told you the first one was the kids when I was off duty.
Right.
This was a little later on, a couple of years later.
When you
had shootings in between these.
Had shooting in between these. Okay, we'll cover them too. But I'm just curious. I myself was involved in a shooting, and unfortunately, I had to take someone's life. But I listened to a podcast you did. I can't remember the name of it, but you worded it so eloquently. You was like, I want to say it was something along the lines of, I saved somebody's life, my own.
Well, that's the other side of the coin. When people say you took 4 lives, everybody wants to hear those stories. Obviously that's the action and the glory, and everybody wants to hear. But the other side of the coin is, I'd be in jail if I wasn't justified. And every time you take a life, that only means one thing, that you're saving at least 1 life. Yeah. Because you have to be justified to use deadly physical force.
Correct.
So if I took someone's life, I had to be justified. And that means I'm saving my life, my partner's life, and or a civilian's life. Mm-hmm. Otherwise I would be in jail. I'd be the bad guy. But we're very versed in deadly physical force and what you can and can't do, and why you can't and can't do. And there's so much oversight. Even back then, when they say it was the Wild West, and and everyone's hearing more about shootings and stuff, I was involved in more than your average cop, that's for sure. But the scrutiny and how many units investigate you to make sure that you were justified. And being an anti-crime cop, you're moving up the ladder and you're getting trained, and all cops get trained in versed in deadly physical force,
Hmm.
but you have to know what you could do and what you can't do.
Right.
Even though it was the 70s, they internal affairs investigates you, a shooting team, detective unit, DA's office, IAD. I mean, there's at least 5 units that are thoroughly investigating you from every angle. And
And forensics
there's a lot of
in them itself.
oversight, but
Yeah.
it's very serious business when you take a life, or even when you fire. Not even if you take a life, if you shoot someone and they live, and even if you don't shoot someone, if you fire your weapon, every bullet is always accounted for.
Hmm.
They make that a point. They use trajectory. They have shooting teams, and everybody. They have crime scene units, and everybody puts in their input and make sure that you are justified. And they track where every bullet went in case a bullet went somewhere and you shot someone 2 blocks away sitting in the window.
Yeah.
Every bullet has to be accounted for. It's a very serious thing. We talk about it like it's a little light, but it's a big undertaking when you carry a gun all the time. It's a big responsibility.
Hmm.
Also, like even when you're off duty, you have to safeguard that gun 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Hmm.
Even when you're on vacation in the hospital, anything you do, you're responsible for that weapon. It has to be locked up. You don't want a bad guy getting it. You don't want kids getting it, God forbid. You don't want it falling in the wrong hands. You have to safeguard that gun 24 hours a day. It's a big responsibility.
And like I think you said in there too, like you can fool a lot of people, even if you were, lying about a story or not being 100% truthful. You can't fool forensics. And if
No.
forensics backs you, then that's all there is to it.
Well, I'll tell you a very good story about that,
Okay.
which could have made the whole difference of me going to jail on that. Uh, and it goes back. Okay, I was in anti-crime. I was doing a day shift because I had to go to court, and I got out of court early. And another officer who wasn't my partner but worked in the anti-crime unit, we got teamed up together, right? And so we went out on patrol around noon, and about 2 in the afternoon, a call comes over the air of a burglary in progress. Now we don't normally respond to that stuff because, like I told you, we're supposed, as anti-crime, you're supposed to pick up things on your own initiative. But in a busy precinct like the 41st precinct, we would back up uniform officers, go as backup. So
Mhm.
we told them we'd back them up, and we happened to get there first, either because I drove faster or the other car was further away, the radio car, whatever reason, we got there first. And as we got there, the call escalated to a female calling for help. So now we're thinking it's more than a burglary, it's like more like a home invasion. A burglary with
Right.
someone home, and now the felon, is confronting a civilian. So now you can't just stand outside and wait for the other unit, be it 30 seconds, a minute or two. You got to go there, to protect the citizen. So we go upstairs. Of course, it's on the fifth floor, top floor. And we get up there and we notice the door is it's open around 6 inches, but you notice it's broken. Someone kicked it in like, you can see the door was the frame was fractured, right? So we go in. It's 2 in the afternoon and it's pitch black. I mean, couldn't even see my hand in front of me, right? And they had like blinds and curtains and blankets and cardboard, everything covering the windows, right? So we hear a girl screaming, and we start walking side by side through what we later found out was the living room when it was blacked out, and then into a hallway that straight back was a bathroom, and to the right was a bedroom where the screaming was coming from. And we're identifying ourselves verbally. We have our guns out in front of us, and all of a sudden, we're going into this hallway. It's about 3 feet wide, probably about, I don't know, 7 feet long, so something like that. And all of a sudden, a male jumps out of the back room and starts firing. All we see is muzzle flash. And right away, my partner gets hit. We're about The most we were 3 or 4 feet apart, the most.
Mm-hmm.
So it's right in front of us. And I see my partner get hit, and he empties his gun at the guy going down, and I start firing. But I try, even in this fast happening incident, I try to remember that I'm only going to fire 5 rounds because I have 6 shots, even though I got another gun. But now this wouldn't be any kind of time to go reaching for an ankle holster.
Right.
So the guy, he happened to be, which we found out later, wasn't wearing a shirt. He was topless. And he came running right into me. And the smoke is all around. And this is, like I told you, it's a hallway. So bullets are ricocheting all around. The bullets are flying every which way. He fired 6 rounds. I fired 5 at the time. My partner fired 6 rounds. So you got 17 bullets
flying around the hallway
and going around. So you can multiply that by 2 or 3, right? And the guy runs right into me. And I grab him with my left hand on his trap. And I actually was able to dig my hands in, hold his trap. And he still had the gun in his hand. But my gun was pressed against his chest. And I fired my last round. It was right into his chest and killed him right there, right against his heart. Now, the first thing I did, my main concern, I know the purpose down. That's the first thing. You got to stop the threat, to kill me or kill my partner or kill any other responding officers who we know are coming right away because they had the original call. So first thing I do, I get to my partner, and he's alive. He's bleeding bad. But we were wearing like army coats, so the blood wasn't all over the place. But inside the army coat, you could see all the blood, right? And I pick up the radio. I call officer shot, 1013. Now cops are pouring into the apartment. He was hit so bad that the decision was made to carry him downstairs. We're not waiting for an ambulance. And the ironic thing, this was on Fox Street also. Told you I killed the guy at the beginning of Fox Street, killed the guy on the other end of Fox Street. So now we get him downstairs, right? And you couldn't get the car to go anywhere because there's so many police cars. So they put him in the back seat of a car. And one of the guys I worked with, what's his name? Billy Rath. He tries to stem the bleeding, and he gets him in the car and puts his fingers in the holes, and now they're trying to get out. So they're bumping into police cars to push them out of the way. You can't make this stuff up. And then they radio, which was smart, they radio Highway Patrol. And Highway Patrol closed every intersection all the way to the hospital. This is all done within 5, 10, 15 seconds. This is going on. So the police cars could race through the intersection with my partner who shot and get him right to the hospital. Even though they got lights and sirens, you still got to be cautious going into it. This way they could treat it like a racetrack and get him right there. And all these moves saved this guy's life because he made medical history. First, he got shot 5 times in the body, and he had 2 other ricochets, one in his back, one in his forearm, which they took out with a tweezer. I told him decades later, he always said he didn't know what that scar was. Later on, I told him that was a bullet they took out with a tweezer, right? So anyway, he had 5 direct hits, and he took 72 pints of blood in 3 hours. Gee. That's an amazing. It made it into medical records, And the mayor wanted to speak to me prior to me going on to a news conference, and it was Mayor Lindsay at the time, and he landed a helicopter on Pelham Parkway outside of Jacoby Hospital. He said, there's no way to land it. He landed on the street and came in and talked to me. But what happened was later on, now the dead guy that Boris and I killed, he goes to the morgue and they do an autopsy. Mm-hmm. And getting back to when you mentioned about forensic evidence and how you got to tell the story and everything. So the detectives were investigating the shooting. They go in there and the ME turns to him in a serious tone and tells him, listen, you have an execution here. There's powder burns inside the skin. So they know the distance of what you shot. Now, if I would have said I shot this guy from 5 feet away, then they'd say this guy's lying. He went up to him. Maybe he dropped the gun, maybe this, maybe that. He pressed the gun against him and killed him. But my testimony right from the beginning was that he ran into me. I held him. I pressed the gun against his body because he ran into my gun. And that was the forensic evidence showed that. If I would have testified differently, I would have had a problem. Yeah. But it shows they could tell powder burns from clothing and from skin. In this case, it was skin. But they traced every bullet. They did everything like we talked. The scrutiny was tremendous. And, obvious. The girl was beat up. The story was uh, he lived, the guy that's deceased, lived on both sides of the street. And he had a wife and kid on the other side and had living with this girl on this side. And this girl got to the point where the girl said, I'm going to tell your wife about us. So he started to beat the living shit out of her. Probably would have beat her to death if we didn't save her. And my partner lived, and the girl was okay. She took a bad beating, but we interrupted it.
Wow. That had to be a chaotic scene in that hallway with all these bullets.
Oh, anytime an officer shot, it's chaotic. I mean, but to tell you the truth, it was chaotic, but even though it was chaotic, there was some semblance of order because officers knew what to do.
Right.
They immediately scooped up my partner, which there wasn't a hesitation. And if there was a hesitation, he would have died of loss of blood. Well, so all these moves that were made saved this guy's life, and the officers do the right stuff.
Right. Well, I mean, as far as like the gun battle, because I can see that you're walking in a dark hallway, and then all of a sudden you're hearing these gunshots, and all you can see is muzzle flash. You can't even see.
That's what I was firing at. I returned fire to the muzzle flash.
Right.
That's the only thing that gave me a talk because I couldn't see him. Because not only was it pitch black, he was black, so I couldn't see the guy. He had like dog jeans on and no shirt. It's pitch black. He's black. The whole apartment's dark black. I mean, and all I had to go on was muzzle flash.
Yeah, and I mean, he probably hasn't got the greatest look at y'all either. Probably he's probably just firing away too, just shooting.
Well, what he had was that narrow hallway. He knew we were in the hallway because he could tell our voices are getting closer. And me and my partner, we kept identifying ourselves because you do that, first of all, because we're in plain clothes, but you always want to let them know. And then you figure if you identify yourself, some people, stop what they're doing. If he would have stopped beating her up and came out, he would have got frisked and cuffed and arrested and probably been out in a day or two anyway, But, that's another thing. You see, police don't make the decisions. The bad guys do. They make the decision. If they want to fight, then we got to fight. If they want to shoot, then we got to shoot. But they're making the decisions. We give them the option, you're going to be placed under arrest. You go the easy way or the hard way. Yeah. They make the decisions, and we got to respond to their actions. Mm-hmm. If they put their hands behind their back or say, okay, arrest me, then it's over.
You had an interesting case, and it's actually one of your episodes on your show, Street Justice, the Bronx, about a Williamsburg rapist. Or Williamsburg, was it Williamsbridge rapist? Is that how that?
Williamsburg rapist. That was the name of it was Williamsbridge.
Williamsbridge, okay.
That's a section of the Bronx. Every area has its own name. Actually, right. Williamsburg is an area in Brooklyn.
Yeah, okay. That's where I was mixing it up. Yeah. I go to New York quite a bit, and for some reason that was sticking out of my head, but that is the bridge in Brooklyn. Were you called over to another unit for this, or were you called over to another section department? It wasn't where you normally worked at, was it?
Well, what it is, I had the cases. He was raping girls in my area, but he was raping them in other areas too. So the detectives, like Bronx detectives, made up a task force.
Okay.
But I was working on it from my own cases with my own partners, right? So we were following leads and stuff. And I had witnesses, and I had a victim. I had one victim. This girl was really, really wanted to get this guy, and he stole her some kind of radio card. I think it was Hot 97 or something. And he also had other ID he took from her. And this girl was willing to go out there and search for him all the time. So she was great. She's what detectives really like because she's willing to work with you, go on the streets day and night. Anytime I could call her up and say, all right, let's go out riding. We're going to search for the guy. And she was willing to do this. A lot of girls, it's a traumatic experience. A lot of girls don't want to be involved.
I want to relive it.
They don't want to relive it. This girl was she wanted him caught, which was great, And she was also viewing pictures. She went to view pictures. We didn't get any hits yet. But so the task force, while they're working on a case, they have meetings. And they'll call all the detectives in and stuff. And I got called into the meeting because obviously I had the cases. And the meeting kept dragging on, and was getting impatient. And I was like a little of a wise guy, I guess. But the boss says, is there anything else we could do to catch this guy? I said, yeah, we could get out of here instead of listening to this shit and get on the street and catch this guy. And my boss was there, and he says to me, "Oh man, you fucked up now. Now you make enemies and stuff." And they wanted to fuck me up, the bosses. But I left the meeting, right? And I called up this girl, and it was like prime time. I said, "Come on, let's go." And me and my partner, my regular partner, took off. I was working with a different guy that day, and we started riding around with this girl. And there it is. She points out the guy. I say, "Are you sure?" So we circle again. She goes, "That's him, 100%." We jump out of the car. We have a chase, get into a fist fight. We get the guy. We bring him in. And thank God, because these bosses, if I didn't show results, they were going to hammer me.
Yeah.
And here I am, right after maybe 2 hours after leaving the meeting, and I get the guy. Save my own neck. Right?
Yeah.
So we bring the guy in, and then we start doing lineups. And then the other detectives come in, and they bring in their complainants. And he starts getting ID'd for like 6, 7 rapes, so it was a monster case. The news came in, and it was dubbed the Williamsbridge rapist, and we put him away for a long time.
But wasn't there kind of a little twist? Wasn't he like very young?
Yeah, he was young. Yeah,
wow.
He was, if I remember correctly, about 16, 17.
Now, in that kind of situation, are they able to try him as an adult, or how does that work?
Yeah, he was tried as an adult.
Okay, good.
17 is legal. Even under 17 for certain crimes, you can be tried.
Yeah, certain
But
circumstances.
he made it to. He was an adult in New York. It's like 17. Some states are 18, some are 16. 17 was New York at the time.
Yeah, because that was an interesting episode. Is it true that like the guy was kind of outrunning you guys, and you had to commandeer a vehicle to?
Yep. We commandeered a vehicle, chased them. They run in and out of everywhere. It was wild.
Yeah. Wow. And you're often referred to throughout that series as someone that could physically, handle himself.
Well, I was in great shape back then.
Yeah.
I always worked out.
Yeah. Is that something that, not necessarily you were looking for, but if anybody wanted to try it, it was kind of like, all right.
Yeah, it was there. I always recommend to police officers to stay in shape. You have to be in shape to come on the job, but then they don't, they don't follow up, and guys get sloppy over the years and stuff. I mean, but you know what? You find that the active cops, the guys in the anti-crime or specialized units, they are in good shape. There's certain guys there's many guys that take their job very seriously and realize if you're going to make arrests, you're putting yourself in a dangerous position, and you should be in shape. If you're going to do something, no matter what it is, you should be in shape to do it.
Right.
If you're going to fight bad guys, you better know how to fight or be willing to fight, take a punch and give a punch.
Yeah. Or if you, like you said, give chase, you got to be able to, try to track them down. Otherwise, you're just going to let them run.
Guys that make arrests, there's a lot of guys that make arrests, and those guys are, well, put it this way. The job is a young job. It's a young man's job. Right. The average age, you're talking like this. When I was on, I guess it's like that today too. The average age is going to be like 23. 23 is an average age. Guy, it's a young man's job. Mm-hmm. So you're predominantly at the better stage of your life anyway, around your 20s. You should be in shape.
There was were you switched over and working detective when you had the Eli, was it Gordon?
Eli Goran.
Goran. Okay.
R-I-N. I was a detective then.
Okay. That was an interesting case because you guys knew about him, but you couldn't really get a bead on him. The only thing you really had to go on was a dog, but your partner, through an unorthodox way, kind of helped you break that case. Kind of give us a little breakdown.
Well, a lot of police work has to be unorthodox, But what happened was, this girl called the police, right? This woman called the police, and she told them, the two uniforms that showed up, that her ex-husband came into New York and came to her house and started slapping her around, which is, not really too much of a crime unless she has an injury. It comes under harassment unless she has black and blues or a black eye or knocked out tooth or something. Then it would come under assault 3. But the officers, it came to the level of harassment. But as they're walking out the door, she says, "Oh, by the way, my husband's wanted by the FBI." Now, you have to realize a lot of people tell police things that aren't true. They'll say, "Oh, yeah, he's got a gun." So then the officers got to go over and frisk him or take an action where they normally wouldn't, or they say, "Oh, he's wanted," and he's really not. But, people, men, women, they say things to make an officer do something more. But the police, these 2 cops were sharp, and they made a note of it. And when they came in to file a harassment report, that would be a report that gets filed but doesn't go nowhere. But they came to me because I had a very good rapport with uniform officers, because anytime they gave me information, I would follow it up. I mean, I ate up everything. Anyone who gave me information, I'd follow up because it might be something. Why turn down stuff that could lead to something, right? And it's funny because this was harassment, and it winds up leading to one of my best arrests in my career, right? So I said to them, "Okay, fill it out, the form, but don't submit it to the regular uniform. Refer it to the squad." That's what you would do if it was a felony. Like,
Right.
let's say she got beat up and the guy left. So I said, refer it to the squad and I'll take it. So I get the paperwork, like a half hour later. I get it, and I start doing research on the guy's name. I call her. I ask her what the story is, and I find out his date of birth. I get everything. And now I start checking warrants. I call the FBI, and I find out this guy broke out of prison in California after he got sentenced to 30 years for a bank robbery. And then somehow he breaks out of prison, in federal prison he breaks out of, gets arrested again in Long Island, goes back to federal prison in Pennsylvania, and breaks out again.
Jeez.
And they don't tell me how he did it, but he broke out of prison, but he's on the streets. And somehow he gets to the Bronx, right? Then I do more research, and I find out he has a blind mother living in the Bronx, not in my area. But once something happens in my assigned area, it could take me anywhere.
Right.
There's no, they let us go anywhere as long as it starts in your precinct, right?
Right.
So I go to the boss and I tell him, with my partner, and I tell the boss, "Listen, we got this guy, he's wanted by the FBI." I reached the FBI, and they said he owes 30 years for the robbery and 6 for escape. He got sentenced in absentia, right? And they tell him he's most wanted, vows never to be taken alive, and he's armed and dangerous, right? So they said they were after him for like 18 months. And they more or less, back in those years, I don't know how it is today, but the FBI sort of looked down on locals,
Mhm.
And he was sort of blowing it off like, "Yeah, listen, detective, don't get yourself worked up. You're not going to get him," something like that. That's the feeling I got.
Yeah.
So I told him, "Listen, all I'm asking you for is send me pictures of him," right? So he sent me the wanted posters that he had, you know. So I tell my boss the whole story, and he looks me right in the eye and he goes, "Ralph, can we get this guy?" So I said, "You take me off the chart, which means I don't catch other cases." I said,
Mhm.
"We'll get him." Now, the FBI, they get one guy to catch, and they get unlimited money and unlimited time. And that's their only case. New York City detectives are catching like 5, 7 cases a day. A day. They're coming in assaults, burglaries, robberies, car stolen. This guy did this. This guy did. They're getting, it's like you're shoveling shit against the tide,
Mhm.
and you try to keep up with it, and you try to catch whatever guys you could. But if you take me off the chart, that means I'm like an FBI guy. I get nothing else. This
Right.
is my case. I can give it all my time, day and night, whatever I want to do, right? So he says, "Okay, you guys are off the case. Get him," right? So we start following leads and everything, and takes us to the other side of the Bronx, and we find his mother's living there. She's blind, and we start to sit and set up stake out there. So we do that for like a week, week and a half, maybe 2 weeks. We're out there, day and night. We're going there for hours at a time, just sitting there. Then we decide this isn't working out too good. He ain't showing up, or we're missing him by a stroke. When we take off, he comes. Whatever. So at one point, he even calls me up. He got it because what happened was we decided to stop the stakeout and we'll expose ourselves. And we started doing a canvas. So we go through the building and we're talking to people, and we talk to his mother and leave her a card. We tell her, listen, if he comes around, tell him to call us. And then we met a girl that my partner got friendly. She was hot on my partner. So my partner had to do the unorthodox, and he wound up having sex with her. And that was like deputizing her in. And she was sitting on stakeouts when we weren't there, and she got us a plate number. But during this time, the guy got a hold of my card, I guess from his mother, right?
Yeah.
Or someone in the building. Anyway, he calls me up and says he's going to meet me, right? And we go to the meeting. He never shows up, but he was there somewhere. He wanted to see who I was.
Yeah, he wanted
to know who he was. He wanted to know who me and my partner were. So now he knew who we were.
That's actually really smart, though.
Yeah. Hey, I'm not saying he's dumb.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, it's kind of like that scene from Heat when the bank robbers know that Al Pacino and the guys are on to him. So they go to that wide open area. They're not really looking at anything, and they're pointing. And then later on, the cops go to try to figure out what they were looking at. And he realized that he's like, you want to know where they're looking at? They're looking at us. We just got made.
Yep.
That's
what he did to us. Exactly. Yeah. And this was way before Heat was made.
Oh, yeah.
You know, so now he knows who we are. But during this time, she's Jewish, and they're throwing a bar mitzvah. So we go there as undercover guests. No one knows who we are. They don't know if we're from the group, her side or the husband's side. They're thinking he says he's going to come. That's why she was scared. So we go to bar mitzvah, but he didn't show up. We went there, three of us. The boss went with us, right? We wound up eating there and everything and hanging out. He didn't show up. So then, like I said, we got a plate number after that from this girl. And it leads us out to Long Beach, New York, which is outside of New York City. But we start staking out this address, right? And stake it out for like a week. Nothing happens, right? And maybe like 4 or 5 days. And we decide we're going to go in the building now. The girl lives there, and that's where the car's registered to. That's how we got it. So we go there, we talk to the super and everything. He says he knows the guy. He is around, and he has a big dog that he walks up on the boardwalk. So we ask him to let us in the apartment. Meanwhile, we don't hear no dog in there. So we said, let us in. We weren't supposed to go in. We didn't have a warrant on it, right? Not that we used too many warrants back then. So we go in the apartment, and we start searching the apartment. No one's home. And we find an attaché case. And there's guns in there and ski masks. So we know, he was pulling stick-ups, and these are the guns and stuff. And we don't have a legal right to be in there. No, let's take the guns and stuff. So we pack everything up, right? We put it all away again, right? And we lock up the apartment, tell the super not to say nothing. We go back on the stakeout, right? And all of a sudden, we see him with the dog on the boardwalk. And it's a warm day, but he's a big guy. He was like 6'4", 270 or something. And he's wearing a black leather jacket. And he's got this monster German Shepherd on a leash that he's like holding back like it wants to go and rip someone apart. So we decide we're going to go up on the boardwalk, which is full of people, right, on a nice day. And we're going to go up real nonchalantly. We're going to attack them from 3 different sides, and we're going to get them. Don't ask me why. I have no idea to this day why none of us were scared of the dog. He's got this vicious-looking dog, monster, probably 130, 140-pound shepherd. And the thing is like pulling like it's going to tear someone apart. So we all go up from 3 different angles. We all had 38s. And we come up behind him, and we stick a gun in each ear and one in his mouth. And the dog's right there. The dog doesn't move, just sits down, doesn't do nothing. I mean, if we had to shoot it, we'd shoot it. I've shot 2 dogs before, but I didn't have to do that, right? So I grab his hand. His hand is in his pocket. I grab his wrist. And I tell him, take his hand out. And he had a loaded gun in the .357 with 30 rounds of ammo in his pocket.
Damn.
And he says to us, this was the kicker. He says, could you please take care of my dog? Could we put it in the apartment? Which was great. Now we have a legal right to go in the apartment. And obviously the thing was in plain view, the attache case with the guns and the mask and the evidence we needed. And we had the gun on him. And that took care of that.
So the dog wasn't vicious at all. Actually, pretty calm
No,
dog.
the dog, I think the dog had a sense. Dogs are smart too. I
Oh,
had
yeah.
a shepherd. I think at the same time I had a shepherd at home. I think the dog was smart enough to know that if he did anything, he was going to go down,
Yeah, I actually own a Siberian Husky, so that's from that same family, and
Yep.
I'm not just saying it because he's my dog, but I believe he's like one of the smartest dogs I've ever seen. Like if he knows he's in trouble or something, all I got to do is just look at something, and I look back at him, and he just walks off. He knows. He
Oh,
knows.
my dog, I got a dog now too. I got a black lab, and he scares me. He's so smart.
Yeah.
The guy knows any way to shake me down for a treat.
Yeah.
I can't. He'll stand like a stone statue unless I say chicken or treat.
Yeah.
He's very smart.
Mine's the same way. Especially if I'm eating, he comes like you said, just sits down and he gives you the evil eye to start with. Then if that don't work, then he gives you the sad eye. It kind of drops down a little bit.
My wife taught my dog a couple of tricks, and he capitalizes on them. She taught him to take the clothes from the bedroom, and the laundry room's on the other side of the house. So the dirty clothes are on the floor. He takes the wash. He takes the clothing to the washing machine, drops it, and he gets a treat, right? Here's the bad part, though. My wife folds the clothes when the wash is done. She'll put her clothes away, but I put my clothes in my own drawer. So my wife will fold them and put them on the dresser. If I don't put them away fast enough, he'll take the clean clothes back to the washing machine. I got drool all over it and stuff. I got to give him another treat because taking the clothes to the wash. Right?
I ain't got to rewash them again.
Right? Exactly. She taught him to bring in the newspaper they throw in the driveway. I get the New York News and the New York Daily News and the New York Post. So she taught him to go out there and get the newspapers. The guy ties them in a knot, plastic bag, and he brings them in. One day out of nowhere, he just stops. He stops after a month. And we had to say, okay, a treat. So he goes, he gets the papers, brings them back. He's doing that for a month. Then he figures out how to untie the papers, and he only brings one. And you got to send them back out for the other paper for a second treat. That's how smart this dog is.
That's gold, man. That's gold.
Yeah,
Unfortunately, you said you got in a position where you had to shoot at one time. Were they attacking you?
I had to shoot two dogs. Tell you, here's what happened. First one, we're heading back to the precinct. Me and my partner, I'm driving, and we're about 3 blocks from three blocks from the precinct. And it comes over the air. There's a burglary in the south end of the precinct, the furthest area you can be from us. And they say the guys got away in a car, and they give the license plate. Would you believe the car in front of us, when they're transmitting the license plate, here's the car right in front of us. So we hit the siren, we get out. My partner gets out the passenger side. He's coming. We see two guys in the car, right? So my partner's covering the passenger side, and I'm on the driver's side, and I take my gun out. It's not back then. We approach suspects in situations with our guns out. Today, they don't do things like that. Everything's different. Mm-hmm. So I always had my gun out in case I needed it. So I had my gun out. I approach the driver's side, and I tell him, shut off the engine. The guy flings the door open, and the second guy, who I thought was a guy, was a monster-sized Doberman Pinscher sitting on the seat like a person. And he flings the door open and says, get him. The dog leaps over the guy, hits the sidewalk in one move, pivots, and leaps towards me. I fire and hit him in the leg. He goes down and he skimpers onto Marshallou Parkway, which was a very treed area. So he's just laying there by a tree, whimpering. We collar the guy, right? After he sees me shoots the dog, he gets out because he figures he might be next, right? Yeah. My partner's going, holy shit, you're so fast on the draw. He said, I've never seen anyone. I had my gun out of it. My partner didn't see me take the gun out. Yes, right? He should have known I always had it out. But he's going, man, Ralph's the quickest draw I've ever seen. So I had the gun out, so it was easy. I just pulled the trigger.
The legend grows, man.
Yeah, the legend grows, exactly. So we cuff up the guy. They take him into the precinct. Another unit, uniforms respond because there's shots fired. People call in. So they take everyone, and I say, listen, I'm going to take care of the dog because I'm a dog guy. So I go over to the dog, and he was whimpering, and I talked to him nicely and stuff. I guess he trusted me, and he was hurt. He let me pick him up, and I put him into the squad car, an unmarked car, and I drive him from the Bronx, the North Bronx. I drive him down to the animal hospital in Manhattan. There's a world-renowned hospital for animals on like just off the East River Drive and like 60th Street. So I bring him in there and I tell him, look, I'm a police detective. I just shot this dog. I'd like you to take care of him. And they took him in. I don't know whatever happened to him. I called the next day and they said he was fine. They took care of him and he'll be okay. And that was it. I didn't really follow up. But I mean, I guess they took care of getting him a shelter or someone adopted him. But that was one instance I had to shoot a dog. The other time, we made some narcotics arrests, right? And I was with the same partner as I was with this dog, right? And there's a funny story to this one afterwards. But we made a narcotics arrest, and it wasn't much, right? The street collar. And we kept trading up with the guys. They kept telling us, well, I got it from this guy, and this guy he had a little more. We're going up the line real quick, right? Until we get to someone who says what apartment they got it from. So now, our boss was involved because we're bringing a lot of guys in. So the boss was involved. So we had to get a warrant, but we didn't really get it. We called narcotics. He says, listen, you can't be breaking into houses with his large narcotics without the narcotics bureau knowing. So we got to let them in on it because it's not like you're doing it instantaneously. We're trading up, right? So we notify narcotics. They get the warrant real quick. And we hit this house. We hit this apartment. It was in a building, right? We hit it, and they make arrests. And now there's an apartment in the back. And it's funny because instead of the bedroom was straight ahead in this hallway, and the bathroom was off to the left, similar to this other shooting, but the bathroom was straight in that one. And this was off. So everyone's collaring guys, and they're getting everything together. And we hear a dog barking in the back. So I'm going to the back with a narcotics cop right next to me, and he's got a shotgun, right? We hit the back door, and the guy's holding the dog, and the guy with the shotgun doesn't fire or nothing, and the guy lets the dog loose, and I shoot the dog, killing him, a German Shepherd. He leaps over the bed. There was a bed between me and the guy. So we do all the paperwork, everything. I didn't shoot the guy, I just shot the dog. So whenever these things happen, you have to do it's either called a 49 or an unusual report. An unusual is a 49 that the boss has got to do, that has to go up the line for each boss to know that there was something heavy happened. In this case, it was a shot fired, killing the dog. So all this is done, and I go home, but I don't see the 49. So the next day I come in, and the guys are telling me, oh, Ralph, you're in trouble, man. You're in real trouble. I say, why? What's up? I said, read the unusual. So I pick it up, and it says, and the boss is there. It says I killed a seeing eye dog, right? And the ASPCA is after me. Guiding eyes are after me. It was all fake. The boss did it as a joke. Guys are breaking my balls, And I'm feeling bad because I'm a dog guy. And at the time, I have a German Shepherd at home too. And I'm saying, oh man, you gotta be kidding me. But it was all bullshit. They would fucking break my balls, This is like cop humor,
Right. Like, what was maybe, and it doesn't even have to be anything that you were involved with, but New York is such it was a hotbed for famous crimes. I mean, you had the Son of Sam, you had the subway vigilante, which was an interesting case in itself. What do you remember from those days when you were on the street of one big case that really gripped New York? It can be something that you were involved in or that you weren't.
There was a lot of big, I'll tell you, there was the Black Liberation Army.
Right.
They were going around killing cops. They were targeting what they called salt and pepper teams, a black and a white cop.
Right.
And they would set them up and then they would execute them. That was really big. And everybody was involved in that somehow, even if you weren't directly. I was always hunting for them. I had pictures of them in my cars. I had pictures in my wallet. I had pictures of, I put them on my desk and my nightstand by my bed, like people would do of their wife and kids. I wanted to know there was 6 of them that were in the New York area that I always wanted to get, and uh, I I didn't run into them. Uh, Learned a good trick from them, but I responded to a shooting in the neighboring precinct. I got there, the shooting was over. A sergeant and his driver ran into them, and what saved their lives was Black Liberation Army fired on them, and they hid behind the car. But when you hide behind the car, you have to hide behind the tires because what they do is they had machine guns and they spray under the car. The bullets would ricochet off the ground and hit cops in the ankles. And then you would go down, then they could shoot you.
Mhm.
So you always learned that you hide behind wheels, the steel wheels. But I just missed that by seconds. Not probably about 30 seconds to a minute. I missed that one. But the cops weren't injured and the guys got away. But they laid heavy fire on them. And then another time I missed Twyman Myers. He got killed by an NYPD task force of state troopers and FBI. They caught him. And I got there. That one I got to like about 2 hours later, but that was really big. And obviously, the Son of Sam was gripping New York at the time.
I mean, that had women totally changing their hairstyle. I mean, I would
Wearing
imagine
wigs.
yeah, wearing wigs.
Yep.
That had to be terrifying in the streets. Though.
Well, everybody worked on that. Everybody had their own CIs. Everybody, I got assigned. There were different times we got signed to different stakeouts, but I would have liked to have been in on that, but I wasn't.
Right.
There was a big case, a very big case in New York that I was involved in. And ironically, I was undercover by myself. Nobody involved. Only one person knew about it. And I was doing it off duty. 90% of the time, it was an off duty case.
Jeez.
And only my captain, my immediate captain, knew about it. And it got to a point, it was the Francis Tavern bombing, one of the first terrorist attacks in New York. They blew up this Francis Tavern, killed 4 people and injured 52. Right, and it was in 1975, January, I think, January or February of 75. And one of my CIs, who was like going back to CIs, he was like a 10. Anything he gave me was good.
Mm-hmm.
And you got to realize in those years with no cell phones or beepers, very hard to deal with your CIs. They had to contact the precinct. Then I had to contact the precinct, get a hold of them. It was a runaround thing. It was not like someone calls you up and says, hey, the guy on the corner of Fox and Prospect is standing there with a gun. You go over there, he's wearing a blue shirt. You go over there, you grab him, case over. This was a whole rigmarole to get to your CI. That was half the job, So we had this CI, and this guy always gave me information 100% of the time. He tells me he knows who it is, who did this bombing. So I told my boss, and he says, well, you work on it, because the CI didn't want to talk to anybody, didn't want to see anybody, wouldn't do anything. So I was working with him for a while, right? And it got to the point where he actually knew where the bombers were going to be. And they were going to be with like 100 other people that were mostly terrorists, right? And they were going to be at a wedding in the Bronx. So at that point, he said, we got to let in another unit. Now it's beyond you and me. He says, we got to let them in. So we notify, we didn't have a bomb squad exactly then. And we didn't have terrorist squads. They had a unit called arson explosion. And they would handle these kind of things. So we had to notify them. And they got involved. And my job was to convince the CI to even deal with them or talk to anybody or to even let them see him. It was very difficult. And this took a while, right? But he said he would do it. He did all this for me. And now we're going to go to the scene. And we're using my car. And they wanted to wire the CI. CI didn't want to get wired. I said, you can wire me. And my car didn't look anything like a police car, obviously. But they had unmarked cars and an unmarked blacked out van with, guys like emergency service guys with machine guns. I mean, everyone's following us a few blocks back, right? Out of sight. But I'm white, right? And while we're going there, this guy, my CI, pulls out a gun. And he starts talking. He says, "Hey, look what I got. I got this 38 and stuff." And yeah, I couldn't sanction that, but I didn't care. You know, I didn't care he had a gun. But all of a sudden now, lights and sirens are surrounding my car. This sergeant that was in charge of this operation, from their side, he never cared for me. He was a different kind of cop than me.
Right.
He was the poster boy for NYPD. He was the guy who did all the walk-ins, walkouts, you know, with like John Gotti.
Yeah.
He was like 6'2", well built, suit, $2,000 suit and tie. He was the poster boy. They called him in to do these walkouts and stuff, and he had his own rep on the street. It was very different than mine. Mine was down and gritty on the street. His was suit and tie. You know what I mean? Flamboyant for the newspapers, right? You know, and he was the lead guy, and he says, "I'm killing the operation. I'm taking your boat in," and accused me of supplying the CI with the gun. Right? So I said, they take us into a precinct, and they're holding me, and I say, "Well, at least go to the location. Forget about us. You're holding us here. At least get the terrorist." He didn't do that.
Wow.
He thinks he got this decorated detective. I was a cop at the time. I got this decorated cop who's supplying a bad cop supplying a gun to a CI on an operation, a serious operation. The whole thing, it just drove me nuts because this was the biggest thing in New York at the time.
Right.
Right?
And
The biggest thing in New York.
getting away?
They never solved the case, even though we know who it was now. And the guy did like 30 years for something else.
Okay.
But it was ridiculous. So anyway, no one knew that I was undercover. You know, none of these guys did, but they're like trying to charge me.
Yeah.
Right. So I had to reach my captain. So I finally get a hold of him, Captain Thomas Walker, and he was the best boss I've ever had. I can tell you other stories about this guy, but this guy was a cop's cop through and through. He's still alive today. I think he's 90. Saw him a couple of months ago. I'm going to see him next month anyway at a reunion. But this guy's still around. I worked for him when he was a lieutenant. I worked for him when he came back as my captain. And this guy, you couldn't get any better boss. That's why he never got, because after captain, you get promoted by who you know, not civil service.
Right.
And this guy was a cop. You know what I mean? I've seen him do things you just can't imagine. And he responded right to the precinct when he heard they were holding me and stuff. And all I know is he took them in the back room, and next thing they said I could leave. That's all I know. And they locked up the guy, which I called the DA, tried to get him, lower the gun charges and everything. But I lost my CI. He never talked. He never wanted to talk to me again, which I don't blame him. It wasn't my fault, but I don't blame him for not wanting to be in touch with police or have anything to do with us. He sort of got fucked, but it wasn't my fault. And we lost touch. I tried to talk to the DA, and I don't know what happened. And the captain got me out. And next thing I know, I get a letter in the mail that I'm being laid off the police. It was 1975, and that was the first time in history they did layoffs. So they said, you're being laid off because you have 5 years or less work. So I said, well, I have 7 years. They said, no, you have 5. So there was no computers back then, right? But I happened to save my pay stubs. So I brought my pay stubs in because I was 2 years as a trainee. Remember, I told you I was too young.
Yeah.
I was actually hired as a police trainee, which had a civilian title. So my pay stubs weren't in line with the police officer. I was a police trainee, which had civilian status because we didn't have guns and shields. I did everything a cop did, but indoors.
Right.
So I brought down my pay stubs, which I saved. Otherwise, there were no record. I showed them. I had 2 years to the day. So I didn't get laid off. And then, like a month later, I was in the last promotions ever given for 7 years. There were a couple of battlefield promotions if you made the front pages and stuff, or if you really knew somebody. If your uncle was the police commissioner. But there was a hiring freeze and a promotion freeze from 75 to 82. And I got promoted. I went from getting laid off to being stayed on, then promoted, and I got promoted, and I got promoted to the next promotion in 1982 to another rank. So I made third grade detective, then second grade detective. And then a year later, I was told I was going to get first grade, which is a very, very prestigious position. But back in that year, in '83, there was only 115 of them in the whole city. And there was 230 second graders, one of which I was. And, we didn't merge. There wasn't a merge yet. So they didn't count transit police and housing police. The merge came in '95. So in '83, though, I was on a motorcycle trip, and I just got back. So I let my partner drive. Not that it was his fault or anything, but we got into a really, really bad accident where my partner, we were going to help another cop, right? And we were heading west, and we were going to turn left to go south. Before we could turn left, a radio car, with all the stuff I've been through, a radio car from the north coming south, T-boned us, hit me right in my hip, about 75 miles an hour, never touched the brakes, zero rubber on the street. And in those years, the highway unit had what's called AIS, Accident Investigation Squad. They needed 30 feet of rubber to tell how fast the car is going. But there was no rubber, not even 30 inches or 3 inches. So they hit me full impact. And that was it. Next thing I know, I was out of work, then I got a disability. I broke 23 bones. They shattered my hip 100 pieces. They broke my pelvic, left, right, upper, and lower. Then I got into the hospital where I was 2.5 months there. I could give you a laundry list of stuff I caught there. Phlebitis, pneumonia, streptococcus, bed sores. It just went on and on. And then I left the hospital. I was in a wheelchair, and I got retired a couple of months later. They carried me on the payroll for a while, and then they put me out, which I really couldn't, run anymore. I couldn't do any of the things I could do. And I was at the top of my game. I was 34 years old. But
I mean, you probably had a long time left. I mean,
I did everything I did in my career. I did in 14 years. You got to take that into consideration.
2,000 arrests in 14 years.
And I assisted in over 5,000 more, maybe
Jesus
closer to 6,000, because we did roundups and we busted gangs, and I assisted in those arrests. We were making arrests dozens and dozens a day in other people's names too, when we hit social clubs and drug dens and other operations and stuff. But in my own personal name, I made over 2,000, 105 of them off duty, which today they'd put you through the ringer if you made one off duty. In my day, you had to carry your gun, shield, and ID. You'd be in trouble if you didn't. Today's rules are, because guys got into a lot of trouble here and there, drinking and stuff. So they said, if you want to go out drinking, leave your gun and shield at home. So it's not mandatory. We were really on duty 24 hours a day, and they wanted you to take action if you saw a felony, even if you're off duty. You're still sworn to protect the public. It didn't give you time limits. It says protect the public.
Right.
And you had to carry your gun and shield. And
did you have any run-ins with any organized crime, like in lieu of the mob in your tenure?
Yes, I did a couple of times. Usually not on a case. Oh, well, actually on a case also. Yeah, I had quite a few now that I think of it. Had one off duty. I was with a girl, and we went to see her sister, right, in the Bronx also. And we're going in the building, and two guys are coming out of the building, and they're walking past me. Right away, I knew they were wise guys, But when they passed me, I saw they had guns, right? So right away, I drew my gun, and I arrested the guy. And the other guy kept walking. I stopped the first guy, I disarmed him, and the other guy kept walking. And this is an ironic story, because this is how I met my best partner, Timmy Kennedy, right? So I lock up the guy, and where there were some stores across the street. So I drag him over to a store, and I tell them to call the police. They were very hesitant. I had to persuade them, because it was a wise guy neighborhood, right?
Yeah.
So they call the police, and this guy shows up, Timmy Kennedy, with his partner, and they take my prisoner, and they said they'll bring him to the police station, and I'll get in my car and meet them there and process my arrest. So while they're driving the precinct, the perpetrator into the precinct, they get another call from communications. It says off-duty detective holding a guy for a gun. I stopped the second guy and got the gun from him, caught up to him. So Kennedy tells him, oh, we got his prisoner. They said, no, he's got another one. So they came back, they take the second guy, and years later, to where Timmy got transferred, Kennedy, and where I got transferred, we ended up being together, and we hooked up as partners. It was ironic because we knew of each other because he was a heavy hitter too in
Right.
his part of in his area. I was a heavy hitter in my part, and we knew of each other. We teamed up and we became great partners.
And you
But
said
those two guys, getting back to the two perps, they were organized crime, and they were the Purple Gang, right? And they
oh,
would have,
wow.
yeah, and they had their records were insane. They had murder on their record, all kinds of records. They went away for years. But when I first became a detective, I went to a very quiet area. It was the North Bronx, and there was a social club where the Purple Gang hung out. And they were parking their cars up there on the sidewalks and hydrants everywhere. So I started going around there, and I heard it was wise guys and stuff. So, I always throw myself into the mix. So what I did, and detectives don't do this, but I got a summons book. I always carried a summons book and a nightstick. Guys didn't do this stuff as detectives back then. And I carried two guns. So I'd go out there on my time and I started writing summonses, right? They started coming out and saying, "What the fuck is going on? We've been parking here 20 years." I said, "Well, the 20 years is over." And then I started stopping them. I'd watch and see when they would leave, stop them on the road, and then I could frisk them and toss the cars and get guns or drugs.
Right.
And it just, I submitted so much stuff to the intelligence division because I'd make intelligence reports. It's a special report that you can fill out if you feel someone's involved in organized crime, stuff like that. And I started filling them out, and I started getting a lot of feedback that they were making cases on information that I supplied. They didn't have this guy's name. They didn't have this plate. This plate led to an address. And I was supplying a lot of information to the intelligence division and making my own arrests on it also.
I mean, that's like you said, like this store being reluctant to call the authorities. It's a tight knit circle to infiltrate.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
why what Joe did was so like groundbreaking to get that close to the inner
Joe
circle where
Pistone, you
he's
mean?
almost, Joe Pistone, to almost getting made. I mean, like he was
But
probably the closest that anybody was ever.
me and Joe would talk, and I would say to him, he'd say, he always congratulated me and saying, you're in danger, you did great. I said, "Joe, let me tell you something. I was in danger when I was taking an action. You were in danger 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I give you the respect, man."
Yeah,
Because he was what you call, I was like surface undercover, as anti-crime.
right.
He's deep undercover. I mean, that's his whole life. I mean, there's no comparison. Guys that do that, like Jay Dobbins, Joe
Yeah.
Pistone, there's guys that are so deep, they're living it. They're living it.
Billy Queen. I don't know if you ever heard Billy Queen's story,
No.
Under and Alone, where he went in undercover in the Mongols. It's a great
Oh,
book.
I did hear that. I did hear
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, it's a great book. He doesn't do a lot of talking. Like I haven't really seen him do like any
Well,
podcast.
these guys are so deep, and it's crazy. They deserve tremendous respect and honor for what they do. Their lives are on the line. Or every minute. It's 24 hours. Even when they're sleeping, away from the crew, anything. They're in deep danger.
Yeah, because the least little thing that you do that could slip up and give away who you are. I mean, the guys he was hanging out with were, and I mean, not that New York isn't full of bad guys, but guys like Sonny Black would kill you at the drop of a hat if they thought you
Without
were
a doubt.
law enforcement. I mean, that's that's it.
Joe Pistone was excellent at what he did. He had the thing down. The jewel thing.
Mhm.
That's how he got in there with the Fugazi stuff.
Yeah.
He worked out. He was a tough guy. He boxed. I mean, there's always going to be guys in any profession that just stand out. And Joe is without a doubt. He's an iconic law enforcement agent.
Oh yeah, 100%. And in the movie, I'm sure you've seen Donnie Brasco.
Couple
He
of times.
kind of develops, a soft spot for the character that Al Pacino plays, Lefty. Did you ever have that in law enforcement where somebody was, on the other side, you knew it, but you just had a lot of respect for them, and you hated to see them, get caught up in anything? Did you ever run through that in your career?
Well, I was always, like I said, I was friends with Chuck Zito. I didn't want to see him get in trouble.
Right. Did you have any run-ins with the Angels at all in your time, or were?
Well, I was friends with a few of them from the tattoo parlor.
Right.
that used to go to Big Joe's tattoo parlor, and we had a problem. We got called. I got called to a fight once in a bar room down in the Hunts Point area,
Yeah.
and this guy comes to the door and he's calling the cops on 2 or 3 angels that beat him up, right? But it wound up, you know, I gave them respect because they were polite when we got there. You know, I told them I was friends with Chuck and a couple other angels I named, and they saw the way I came in. They gave me respect, so I give them respect, right? And it wound up that the guy who called the police that was bloodied up, he started the fight and he deserved it. I
Yeah.
spoke to witnesses. I got everybody's story, and nothing happened. I left.
You,
You know, they didn't deserve to get locked up. They were
right.
defending themselves. This guy was a drunk, probably wanted to test them, and
I was about to say, if
his
anybody
test
should have
didn't
been
go
locked
too
up.
well.
Yeah, anybody
You
who'd been
know?
locked up, it should have been him for not using good common sense.
Well, he got a little better than a lockup from them, so it sort of worked out. You know,
I mean, that's not a group you want to test, I don't think.
So I told them, take care. You know, I don't think they would have fought me. You know, it was respectful. It was a respectful situation. If I
Right.
told them they were under arrest, they would have went peacefully. But it didn't come to that. You know,
Right.
there was no need for that. And I'm able to assess the situation, get the facts, and there was no reason to arrest him. The guy got what he deserved. You know, he started it. He went after them. They defended themselves. He got the lumps, and now he's going to call the cops.
Yeah.
You know, that's a pussy. You know?
Do you remember, I mentioned this earlier, do you remember that subway vigilante case?
Yeah. Gets.
That thing, man. I mean, obviously, it was a little bit before my
I
time.
think-
But I watched the
I think
documentary.
that the movies were based on that. The Death Wish movies.
Death Wish, I do too. That's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
I think that was kind of loosely based on that, because wasn't there something with that trial where he didn't get arrested, but then he said something stupid that really kind of painted him in a bad light?
He never got arrested. Oh, during the shooting, he says, "Oh, I think you deserve another one."
Yes.
You know,
I mean, there's some
but
things you
he
just
never
got to
got
keep quiet.
convicted. Yeah, he never got convicted for shooting them. There was no
Right.
conviction. He didn't. He was justified. He only got convicted on the gun charge for having an illegal gun, and his first name was Bernard Getz.
Bernard, that's right. Yeah,
Right?
I encourage anybody that's not familiar with that, go check it out. I think there's an episode somewhere on Netflix about it, like, just famous crimes or something. It was really interesting because I think
he was assailed, as a hero. He didn't kill any of them. They all got 4 of them got shot, I think.
Right, but it was like that. Finally, someone stood up for the common guys.
The public loved it.
Yes,
The
they
public ate it up.
Yep.
I think, and I don't even think he was caught. I think he surrendered.
I think he did.
Surrendered, right?
Because it happened, I believe, on the subway. Right, it was on the subway when it happened.
In the subway. But I think he surrendered far away.
Yeah,
like about 2 weeks later or something.
Yeah, it was a substantial time period later.
Yeah,
I think
2-3 weeks. They were plastering his pictures around, and he was like a hero.
Yeah.
We're going through, New York is going through something like that right now. We're a Marine, and his name is Penny.
Mm-hmm.
The guy's first might be Richard Penny. He's a Marine, and this guy, some subway, it happened in the subway too. Subway hustler started terrorizing a car with people, and he held him down, and the guy died from the chokehold. He kept struggling, and the Marine kept holding him. Actually, 2 other people held him too by his legs, but they only locked up the Marine. And I think his trial is coming up in September or October. It happened about a year or 2 ago, or a year and a half ago.
Yeah, I remember that now. I remember that now that you bring it up.
I think his name is Richard. I know it's Penny. I think it's Richard Penny, and the trial's coming up. He's out on $100,000 bail, and the city is very divided on it. I think it's more in his favor that because people are fed up. People are being terrorized on the trains.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That'll be an interesting case to watch because, like you said, people are fed up, and I think some people will start to fight back. But then, say this goes bad for him, then that's going to make people less reluctant to do something. So you're really giving the bad guys more ammunition that they can do whatever they want and get away.
Well, this I don't want to get into politics and stuff, but this liberal city that's being ran, the sanctuary city and stuff, they seem to prosecute the victims. Like with people. There was another guy, a Spanish guy, Alba, who an older guy, and the guy attacked him, came behind the counter
in the convenience store. I was
right, and the guy and it ruined his life, and he got locked up. But public opinion was so strong that they released him and dropped the charges. He was
Yep.
only defending himself, but he wound up moving back to the Dominican Republic, I think it was.
Yeah.
And his whole life was disrupted. All he did was try to save his own life. This guy was
I was-
terrorizing him and beating him, and he stabbed him, and the guy died. But you see, the guy started the initiation. The guy started by punching the guy, so he created the thing. He made the decision. Then
he was the aggressor.
100%. And the public was so for him and against the perpetrator that they let this guy go. D.A. Bragg had to drop the charges.
And
but this is what
I'm
they
glad
do. They keep locking up the victims. It's a sad situation. And every day in New York, and I don't even know how many are not reported or not reported by the news, but how many people are thrown in front of trains, shot, stabbed. And you got a mayor goes online, goes in the news and says, New York is safe. It's only your perception. What do you mean it's my perception? You see everybody getting shot, stabbed, and thrown in front of a train. There's crime. Crime is rampant.
Yeah, I was paying heavy attention to that case. I was still in the middle of the case that I had going. And so anything self-defense, whether it was that, Kyle Rittenhouse, I was really glued to kind of see the perception of that, because when you start trending those lines of, like you said, trying to lock up the innocent, then that's when you got a whole lot of problems. And that's really a whole nother podcast, but I was paying a whole lot of attention to those cases. And I was glad.
New York I don't know where your case was.
I'm in South Carolina.
Well, I'm sure it's better than New York. New York is bad.
It's slightly better. You would think it wouldn't have blossomed into what it into, because we are a little bit more gun friendly. I know if my situation in New York, it would have probably went a whole nother different way. But it's still spiraled out of control.
Wish you luck.
Yeah, well, it's over now. It's done.
Oh, okay.
I fought it for 5 years, and like you said, you can't fool.
What happened? 5 years parole, you said?
No. 5 years. I fought it for 5 years. It was kind of ongoing for 5 years.
And you cleared?
Yep, clear. Never went to trial.
Okay.
Yep, it was basically just litigation the whole time.
I'll tell you, just to give you an idea how bad New York is. I did a commercial for gun insurance, and I didn't even know about it until a few years ago myself. And I buy it now. Well, actually, I don't have to buy it right now, but because I got it for free because I did the commercial. That was my payment.
Yeah.
But show you how bad New York is. They ban it in New York, insurance for guns. Como doesn't allow them to sell the insurance in New York State. I have it. It covers you. You get a lawyer immediately. Covers your legal expenses, or you could use their lawyer. Otherwise, $250,000 for your own lawyer, and it covers you $2 million for a civil suit, because you're going to be sued afterwards also.
Right.
But it's so important to have gun insurance because it's like driving a car. If you hit somebody, you got to be identified.
I tell you, my story.
You could lose. It could cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars to prove your innocence.
Oh, bro, I'm probably sitting at $120 some odd $1,000 for nothing. We didn't even go to trial, and I'm $125,000.
Imagine. So you would have been up in the $500,000 range at least.
Yeah, I would have been up in there, and I would be a perfect spokesperson for that insurance of why you needed it. Because
am I allowed to mention the name?
Yes, absolutely.
I'll show you a picture of what I did also. I wound up, they flew in to film me, and it's on a video also, but this is the magazine.
I just seen that on your Instagram, concealed carry.
Yeah, United States concealed carry. Great insurance company. And they flew in and did a whole article, and I got like 5 pages in there telling my story. And they profiled one shooting that's in the magazine that you scan it with your cell phone if you have that technology. And you could see they do a recreation and they talk about it.
Yeah, I might need to get their information and reach out to them, because I've said
it runs about $350 a year, but they cover you for everything in your home and out of your home, everywhere.
It's so worth it. I mean, when I got my concealed carry permit, it's one of them things you think, well, I'll never need that. If I do it, I know I'm in the right. You don't know how people will spend.
You still have to identify yourself if you're in the right. Just like a picture driving a car and someone runs out in front of you. They're wrong, but you're going to be sued.
Yep.
And you got to have insurance to identify yourself. And you know what you would like in this magazine? It comes out probably 10 times a year. You get the magazine as part of the in the package, right? They
Right.
profile people in cases that go to court, and some like your case would be profiled in there.
Right.
You
Yeah.
know, and they tell you, what you should have done, what you could have done, how it could have been worse, how it could have been better. But
Mhm.
they profile citizens who have incidents every month.
Yeah. Well, I'm really interested in getting a little bit more information on that. When you, like you said, you were kind of had to go ahead and exit the police force after the accident where you were hit. When did you decide you were going to write a book?
Well, I tried to write a book once while I was working. I tried in 1978, and I got turned down by everybody. And they said at that time, and I had a few shootouts then. I had quite a few by then, and I was very active and had big cases. And I got turned down. They said you had to do something nationally known, like you had to save, the president or the pope or something. They turned me down. But then years later, uh, you also got to find the right co-writer and
Right.
everything. And there's a funny story too because I never met my co-writer, Pat Piccarelli. Um, we did everything by phone and everything by email, and we got hooked up by a mutual friend through Facebook.
Wow.
And I shipped them boxes of stuff, copies of all the stuff, because we had to prove everything that I wrote. They
Right.
wanted the book. This is not a self-published book like
Right.
most guys. There's no checks or balances. You really could write anything, to be honest. But when you get published by a publishing house, like I was one of the big ones, uh, you know, and they want facts. They have fact-finding teams led by a lawyer,
Hmm.
and you got to prove it, or they'll find the facts and verify it. But I kept about 90% of my stuff, so I made their job easy. I kept all the paperwork, and um, it takes a long time to write a book. And when I got hooked up with it, it actually took 2 years.
Yeah.
Only took about 6 months to write the book, but then the legalese of the partnership with the co-writers, then with the publishing company, then they have teams. When you got a big publisher, they give you a publicist. They have a team that picks out the colors of the
Hmm.
book, what pictures are going to be in it. You have to submit it to another team. I give them 100 pictures. They might pick a dozen. Then they'll have pick the binder is another thing. Then you got to get someone to write the forward. You got
Right.
to get blurbs. My who wrote the forward was my captain, Tommy Walker. He wrote the forward for me. That was incredible. And then among other stars that wrote blurbs for me, Chuck Zito was one of them.
Right.
He wrote a blurb on the book. Uh, Everything coincides and it takes time. And the legalese, you know.
Hmm.
Here's the cover, you know. You got to see it there.
Yeah.
And the doc is the blurbs on it, the bind, everything, pictures. Oh, and then besides, before all that starts, you have teams that do editing, and
Hmm.
there's chapter editing, then there's paragraph editing, and then there's line editing. It's a very big process.
Yeah, it sounds like it, and we'll put a link to that in our show notes for people that want to go check that out. I'm sure they'll get a kick out of it. We'll put the Amazon link in there. Before
And
we
the show came about. It was a fluke out of nowhere. There was some pre-promotion on the book, right?
Mhm.
And a girl going to work happened to see it, the pre-promotion on the book, and she happened to be a producer. She went into her company and told her boss, "Oh, I saw this thing. This detective they're writing a book on. He's got great stories." So they reached out to me, and next thing I know, I was filming, and it was incredible. And another amazing part of the whole thing that took almost 2 years, and they both fell at the same time in September of 2017. I had the book and the show come out at the same time. I don't think many people can say that. Even big stars. I was pretty lucky.
And I recommend that TV show. I mean, we talked about a few of the episodes, in our conversation today, but I think there's 6 of them total. And it's really good. It kind of has you narrating and telling the story, but then kind of actors playing the parts and
Right, they
as you go
recreate
along.
scenes.
And it's really well done. I enjoyed it. I mean, I hated it.
It's,
It kind of got cut short on only 6 episodes. I know you had more.
we had seasons to go. They had postums from floor to ceiling, wall to wall. we were ready to go, and then a few incidents happened that it just didn't go. First was a budgetary thing. It's very
Mhm.
expensive. Uh, there was a couple of things. First, the budget thing was mine was a low budget project, and to get really into it, it was a time specific thing and outside. So
Right.
you have to watch for everything. You have to watch hairdos, jewelry, clothing, the cars. You have to close streets. You need security. You need police, private security and police, permits. When you're outside and doing time specific, it's very, very costly. The
Yeah.
other thing was, uh, at first, we shopped it around, right? The production company makes projects and they sell them to networks.
Hmm.
So at first, a couple of networks didn't want it, and Discovery took it. ID didn't want it at first. That's the parent company.
Right.
So the first two come out. We got six, right? The first two come. The first one comes out, and ID loved it, so they want to take it from Discovery. So after three shows come out, I get moved over to the ID channel, and there was a lull in between, and you sort of break the momentum. Not of us
Yeah.
filming; they're filmed already. We broke the momentum of the film following. If you don't put a lot of money, a lot of people didn't know where my show went.
Right. That's what I was going to
A lot
say.
of money
Back then, they
wasn't
probably
made.
didn't know where to go to find it.
Exactly. And they were very tight on the numbers. They want you to have at that time, this is what they told me, and this is between viewership, on demand, people that tape it also.
Right.
They
VOD.
could,
Yeah.
they could calculate all the numbers. They wanted me to have 1 million people a week following me. And they told me my numbers came in. It's a lot to me, but they thought it fell short. They wanted me to have 1 million. I was coming in around 800,000 a week following me. To them, that 20% difference meant something to them.
You
You know,
probably lost the other 20%
I
in the
lost
switch over.
people when I switched over.
Yeah.
And then with the budgetary things was a problem. And then the George Floyd thing came in, and that hurt me a lot because everything went anti-cop, you know.
Right.
And the five big publishers, I was told, they've got together, which they never did. They didn't even do this for Hitler. They didn't want to do nothing about cops. It's true. They didn't ban books about Hitler, but they banned, the five of them said, we're not going to do anything on cops unless you had a tremendous backstory, like
Right.
you were a gang member and somehow you slipped through the cracks and became a cop. Like something big that wasn't really the cop you were zeroing in on. You were
Yeah.
zeroing on something else, and the cop was secondary.
Almost
You
like
know?
the whole 7-5 situation with Michael Dowd, something like
Yeah,
those. Yeah.
but they had a lot of things. As lucky I was to get to where I was to have a book and a TV series, I was unlucky where it didn't proceed forward. I feel I was this close to stardom. You know what I
Right.
mean? If I would have got a second seat. I mean, people were starting to notice me when I go get gas or go to the supermarket. Hey, aren't you the guy on that show? If I had another season or two, forget it. You know?
Oh yeah, it would have rolled in, and you hit it with the time specific. You do run into a lot of costs
Yeah,
that you wouldn't necessarily run into. That's one reason why the show
big
Boardwalk
course.
Empire was a great show, but it became too expensive to maintain with just the look of the show, let alone the popularity of the show and the actors and the price to
Well,
keep
they
them.
ran theirs up
Yeah,
because of the actors they were throwing in.
yeah,
Mine was really because of time specific and outside. When you see a lot of homicide investigations, they could take one big room or like a one warehouse, and you could film all different scenes. You
yeah,
could film the perpetrator's house, the victim's house, the police station, the courthouse. You could make everything in one thing. But when you're
yeah,
going outside, when we're doing a chase scene, you're passing dozens and dozens of cars driving and parked. Everyone had to be time specific. There's a lot of cost involved, and you got to close the streets.
yeah,
You know, you got to get permits and time of day and private security and police, and it's very, very costly. But the time specific thing is big. We
yeah,
did a scene of a party scene in a restaurant. It was supposed to be like a bar mitzvah. That's when I was going for Goran,
yeah,
FBI.
yeah,
Now we had to cut down. What we did was all those people in those scenes were the producers, people that worked in the producers' offices,
and
and
just
her
get in front of
family,
the
and
camera.
my friends and family. I had my brother-in-law, my nephews, friends. Everybody was in those scenes. But there was an upstairs, and they spent like over 4 to 5 hours dressing people up in the right clothing for the time and getting the right jewelry. And they couldn't wear like certain watches because, carry a cell phone.
Right.
There's so much stuff, and you need people to run that, and it takes time. So it's just a tremendous thing.
Well, I'm gonna close out with this question, and it's kind of one that it can span a lot of different areas, a lot of different time periods. Some in New York, some in the Boston area. You have these guys that have been classified as, either I guess you would say CIs or informants. Whitey Bulger, Greg Scarpa would be a one from the New York area back when the Colombo Wars were going on, which was probably around the time period you were in the streets. He was alleged to be a CI, but was given carte blanche to basically do whatever he wanted in the streets. Where do you sit with that? I mean, do you think CIs are strictly there for information? Does it come to a point to where you're letting one guy get away with too much to try to get other guys off the street? How does that sit with you, and where are you at with that?
Well, first of all, no police department could operate. They wouldn't last 24 hours without CIs.
Correct.
You need CIs. Now, we know that CIs are involved with bad stuff or being with bad people because that's why they got the information.
Right.
And some of them, they do it for different reasons. Some of them want money out of it. Some of them get paid to be a CI. Some do it. They like to play both sides of the fence.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them are cop buffs themselves and just gyrated to the other side. But people like, you get something like Whitey Bulger and stuff, upper echelon guys in the organized crime. They do it not for money or stuff like that. They would do it more for like letting themselves skate, on certain things. The FBI or cops don't know the total of what they do. There's certain things they can't do. If they're dealing drugs, they're going to let that slide. But if they're shooting people in the head, they ain't going to let that slide. Right. They do it also to cut the competition.
Yep.
There's many reasons, They do it to skate on stuff themselves. If they got a case, if you could, like I said, when we were getting drugs and you're moving your way up, if you got a guy with 10 ounces and you get 2 pounds and the 2 pound guy gives you 5 pounds, the other guy gives you 10 pounds, you move up and, we let them skate on small stuff,
That was,
Are
you familiar with Greg Scarpa and his story?
No, I know the name. I know he's in organized crime and stuff. Yeah. I don't know no specifics.
He was in organized crime. He was alleged to, be a cooperating informant. They called him the Grim Reaper for his, willingness to actually go along with hits. Like normally you think when you get to that level, you would kind of sit back and call the shots and other people would do the dirty work, so to speak. He would actually go along with it. And he contracted AIDS because he was getting a blood transfusion from a hospital. He refused to take blood from their blood bank, from their, blood bank that they had at the hospital. He chose to take it from one of his own guys who was sharing needles and had contracted HIV virus. So when he got the blood transfusion from him, obviously the guy didn't know he had AIDS. It wound up giving him AIDS. And they said once he got that, it almost became worse because he knew he was going to die. So it just released like a whole nother beast until he finally did wind up coming to the AIDS. I'm surprised they haven't made a movie about that yet, just with all the details in it. Because apparently he was someone cops reached out to and they sent him down to Mississippi during the kind of like the Mississippi burning and caught 2 guys. I mean, it's a very deep,
I read a little of some of what you said rings a bell.
Yeah.
Especially going down to Mississippi too.
Yeah.
And I'm starting to remember some stuff you said about the blood transfusion.
Yep. Yeah. It's like you want to get from your own guy because you think
he was a bad guy to begin with. He just got
very bad.
Knowing he was going out of the picture soon.
Right. So that just made it worse. If you're already going out, I mean, it was like it just made an evil man 10 times worse. Ralph, man, I've enjoyed having you on. I've had a blast. I hope you have.
I had to.
Thank you very much for coming on, man. I've had a wonderful time. Again, we're going to plug your book. We're going to put a link to that, Amazon in the show notes below. We're also going to put a link to your show as well. It's on Amazon. You can go check that out as well. I think it's on some other streaming.
It's on Amazon Prime.
Amazon Prime. Okay, we'll put that in there as well.
Thank you very much, Wade, for having me. You know, I think you covered a lot of crime and entertainment.
We did. We can cover it, but that's why I like doing this. Yep, crime and entertainment, and we keep it entertaining. Ladies and gentlemen, that'll do it for this week's episode. Please go check out the book, Steet Warrior, and also the TV show, Street Justice, The Bronx. That'll do it for today's episode. I'm Hollywood Wade, and that was Ralph Friedman. Ralph, we appreciate it, my friend.
Take care, Wade. Thank you.
Thank you.